Hi, Abe.
Hi there. It's so nice to speak with you. I'm a big fan of physical and looking forward to talking about this show today.
My pleasure. Nice to meet you. Nice to see you.
You too. What's new about Sheila as a character for you compared to the roles you've played in the past?
Well, I think it's funny. I was doing Mrs. America, and that weirdly felt like such an interesting jumping off point because it ended in 1980, and this picks up in 1981, I think, season one. So it felt like a really like a woman who has lived through those times, who's become disillusioned with second wave feminism and has you know reached this point where she's still in a pretty traditional marriage and harboring this dreadful secret, and has become sort of disillusioned with the movement. And it kind of felt like a companion piece in a way, and like, Sheila was a lot of those characters in that show in many ways. So it was a nice sort of weirdly, unbeknownst to myself, kind of an introduction.
What was your previous experience with aerobics?
The Cindy Crawford workout, 1995 in Balmain in Sydney, Australia, doing that in my living room.
Not a very big part of this show, having to learn that and, all those performance scenes.
It is. It's wonderful to be able to do, not to, no pun intended, but the physical aspect of the show is wonderful in many ways because it's so immersive and it makes you less self-conscious than anything to take you out of a decision, that you've just purely are actively doing something. And the aerobics is such a big component. I start training, a few months in advance, with our wonderful choreographer, Jennifer Hamilton. And she really got me through all the seasons, but particularly that first season when COVID was extremely rampant and we were all in shields and masks and barely, and she's a real coach in many ways. So that I leaned on her greatly. I'm deeply uncoordinated. I am not a natural with those things. So it was something I had to constantly, use every fiber of my being to concentrate on what I was doing.
So many great relationships in this show, and I think I want to start with between Sheila and Bunny. I think Della is terrific, and it's just there's such a wonderful competitive animosity there.
Yeah, yeah, she's a terrific character, and she's so off. Her rhythm is so off kilter to Sheila's, and she's also full of so many secrets and sort of double lives, and presenting one thing but is really another. And she she just is immediately suspicious of Sheila. She's suspicious of everybody, but there's that she's just such a refreshing character. She's so kind of contrary and so unpredictable and spontaneous in a way.
It's also nice to see the development of Greta as a character and just the way that that friendship works. Because sometimes it's very difficult to watch, I think, because she's not treating Greta as she should. But if she was there for, if she opened herself up, I think Greta would completely, welcome her in. What is it like working with Deirdre?
Deirdre's a dear friend. I mean, I adore her, and it is such a tough relationship because when you're suffering from an ED like this, anything that's the opposite from addiction is closeness, right? Is intimacy. So a friendship is not available to Sheila. She cannot access a friendship because she's so isolated in her addiction and in her illness that it's so scary. So there's negative voices stopping her from doing it, and stopping her from doing it is all the addiction. Like, you can't get close to anybody because that means vulnerability, that means shame, that means all these things that she's burying. So it is a hard thing to read as well, and to recognize this pattern of an addict and how they treat people and how they function in friendships. And it's interesting to see particularly how it develops in season 3, and I know we're focused on season 2, but in season 2 it is also blossoms in a way that is sometimes questionable.
Nice to have something to look forward to in season 3. I'm excited about that.
Yeah.
And I think also, I mean, Danny is someone who also I think has a pattern of predictability. It's a different kind of thing, but he's always sort of going to come back to himself. I'm sure Rory is a bit more self-aware as an actor and not quite as in his own head. What is your working relationship like?
The show is in so many ways a real examination of a marriage, and a marriage falling apart, and the marriage that's become completely dysfunctional and has no communication, and but is a long marriage, a long relationship. And so that has been so fun. I love our scenes together. I feel we have a a good shorthand at this point, but Rory was one of his first sort of big dramatic roles, and I couldn't have asked for a better scene partner. He's just very present. He brings comedy and vulnerability and warmth to a character that is at times a real challenge for the audience, and people often come up to me like, how do you stand that guy? And it's a testament to his performance, because he's nothing like that character, aside from sort of, I guess, aligning with his political views in some sense, but he's not he doesn't have a lot of the shortcomings that Danny does. Yeah. But in season 2, he really tries, and that's what was lovely about Annie's idea for season 2 was really reversing the roles and seeing him make this effort to change, which is so hard. It's so hard to change.
It's also been interesting to see the way that Bream has evolved. And I've spoken to Paul Sparks. I know that he's has a bit more personality than his character there. But those scenes are, especially the one of the ending scenes of season 2. Those are particularly intense as compared with, I think, the rest of the show.
I know, it's so funny. Paul's an old friend of mine, and it's never, we're just constantly kind of doing these intense scenes and then stopping and laughing. But Paul is an inimitable actor. He's just so present and also so unpredictable with his performance, and he can access everything in a very off-kilter way and then ask you about what you had for lunch. So I always rise to the occasion with him. I love our scenes, and that dynamic is also dangerous between them, which is exciting.
It was fun to see Murray Bartlett in this season. He brings, I think, a similar energy to Sheila, which of course presents its own sort of threat, right?
Yeah, he is her, it's a case of keeping your enemies closer than your friends kind of thing. And you don't know whether he's going to become a rival or a mentor or both. And they have this couple of crazy episodes together, and I loved that. He's sort of a cautionary tale in a way for Sheila to see what success can and does to people. And all of the trappings of it, and all of how seductive it is as well. So, and we had a lot of fun, again, doing a lot of physical stuff together, and we were desperate to try to get him back for season 3, but we couldn't figure out the schedule, unfortunately.
One thing I always think about when I'm thinking about the show is how close the camera seems to be to people's faces. Is that really what it's like, and is that disorienting?
Craig Gillespie did the pilot, and he's one of the producers, and he set the tone visually, and this sort of intensity of the camera and the constant energy and the tension and this kind of war that's going on inside Sheila's head, and it's expressed so much visually, which I loved. And like anything, it's just a technicality that you get used to. The VO stuff is a technicality. In season 3, we really play with a lot of those dynamics even further. And again, it's like a technical challenge at times, but it's, yeah, definitely that first season was finding my sea legs with that. And yeah, but the actors when we have new people on, they're like, whoa, why is the am I ever going to look at you, or I'm just going to be looking at the matte box?
Well, the voiceover is pretty harsh. Is it difficult to get into the mindset of recording that and just being so cruel?
I have to actually go today to do I think it might be my last one for this season, my final VO. It is cruel, and it's sort of the final texture of the piece in a way, and we play with tone. We play with like how dark, how hot, how the thermostat of the voice and where it's at. And I personally love it. I'm one of those strange creatures that loves looping. I like ADR. I love VO work. You can change and tweak, and it is like a technical exercise, but can be quite successful in just changing one thing in a scene or a tone here or there. And the VO is very much part of the whole texture of the show. So I enjoy doing it, albeit if it is quite brutal, it's also quite funny. But yeah, I like a dark laugh.
Anything else, generally speaking, that audiences should anticipate about season 3?
Well, Zooey Deschanel joins the cast, and that's really, really fun, and kind of, I think, really going to be unexpected for people exactly how she joins the cast. So I'm very excited for that story to be revealed. And you really go further along in the story of Sheila and this of a woman, how a woman reverse engineering how she gets to this stage of success in her career, and what the cost of that is, and what the cost would have been if she hadn't been successful. So it's again, I think it's a fun ride for the audience, and also, you know, dark at times and challenging and funny, and all the things that Annie Wiseman can do so brilliantly with her writing.
I know that while we're waiting for season 3, audiences will have a chance to see you much sooner back on Apple TV Plus in the new show Platonic. What can you preview about that?
Well, it's got very different hair, a really different hairstyle. Let's just go with that. She's blonde. She's Australian. I doubt anyone's going to think it's the same person. I hope they don't anyway. It was so lovely to work with Seth again, and so interesting to go from one set to the other. And this is a far lighter piece. It's very funny. The joke is the most important thing in every scene in a way. And I hadn't worked with Seth since the Neighbours movies, which was, gosh, nearly 7 years ago. And it was great. It was also a different dynamic because we're playing best friends, not a married couple. So that was fun to kind of realize how far we could go with being like assholes to one another. And I'd never heard of this. I hadn't been approached about this subject of a platonic friendship between a man and a woman, and what that looks like at a certain point in your life, at a certain age, when you're up to different chapters in your life, and can that exist, and what does it look like really? You know, people are always like, oh yeah, I've got lots of friends, and then you kind of get granular about it of, okay, so do you go out to dinner with just them? Do you go on a vacation just with the opposite sex? Do you like trying to kind of examine it more with a finer kind of, with a microscope? And it's interesting, the conversations I've had around that. It's not nearly as straightforward as you think.
Oh. And thinking back to a past role of yours, I think I first saw you on Damages. That is such a different kind of show. Definitely sort of
I was
dwells in the
just
dark.
with Glenn like yesterday.
I remember that they were FX, I think, was airing ads. Some of them made it look like the darkest, dreariest drama it could be, and some sort of made it look like a comedy about that was like Devil Wears Prada, Glenn Close terrorizing you. What was the experience of that show like, and what do you think back on it now?
I'm so proud of the show. We came out the same year as Mad Men, when cable shows were just starting to really take off, before now, where there is just a deluge of content. And Damages came out right at that time, where HBO had really set the bar with like Oz and Sopranos and 6 Feet Under. There was some great sort of limited series coming out of the UK, but it was before what we see now, which is just it's the only thing. There's too much content. So I'm so proud to have been part of that first wave of that renaissance of television writing, and, incredible, complicated, complex female characters on television. So, and I look back with such fondness, and it was an incredible training ground for how hard you work on those shows. Like, I had only done independent film in Australia and some studio movies in the States, but nothing like this. And it's a very different working experience that you have doing a series like that. And I've made some lifelong friends on it too. So it was I have nothing but fondness looking back at the show.
Great to hear. And before I let you go, I do want to mention a film of yours that I was excited to see again, looking back at your credits, which is Juliet Naked.
Oh, yeah, thanks. That's sweet. I know, it's a really charming little movie.
I really, really enjoyed that one. I got to see it at Sundance a few years ago, and I wish it had been sort of more broadly received. I hope other people saw it. I just think it's a real nice gem.
It's getting kind of discovered more. I've had people approach or mention it or discover it, on streaming, which is the nice thing about streaming, is that people can kind of access things that, didn't find an audience at the time. So, and again, that's a lovely movie, and really fun, and again, made with good friends. And I was pregnant with my second child when I shot it, so it's very special in my heart too. And and I love Nick Hornby. I had been a fan of that novel for many, many years, so it was really really cool to bring it to life.
I think because of the film's subject matter, it being discovered after its time is probably a very fitting, fitting thing for it.
That's so true. I love that. Yeah, it is. It's totally like it is. It's a rediscovery of sorts. And it's hard to often to find tonally something if you've what you feel like watching, and that film is very approachable. It's very funny. It's very warm. And sometimes that's just what we need, what we feel like watching, I think too.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for taking a few minutes. It was very nice to meet you, Rose.
Thanks, Abe. Nice to meet you.